During this episode, we're going to help you create a roadmap that goes from where you are now to your end goal. And we're going to help you plan it in such a way that you have the right resources at the right time, and also that you rehearse those first key steps so that by doing those first key steps easily and well, you start moving forward and building yourself a momentum that will help you carry on throughout the whole plan. In the whole episode, I'm going to be covering what timeline is, what first steps are, what future pacing is, what milestones are, a metaphorical description, my own experience, a case study, what we need to do next, an exercise, and then draw the whole lot together in a conclusion and let you know what happens next. So what is timeline? Timeline is really a spatial representation of time. For example, the future might be in front, the present might be here, the past might be behind. But in having a spatial, almost a map laid out, it enables us to plan our journey almost as much as we would plan a campaign or war. And in doing that planning and that rehearsal, it dramatically increases our chances of getting results far bigger than what we expect. The future pacing aspect of it is mentally rehearsing small but important steps, because mentally rehearsing small and important steps enables us to be much surer of taking those steps in the appropriate way at the appropriate time. What's my own experience of timeline? Well, I found it one of the most useful of all the NLP exercises, both doing it kinesthetically, which is about walking forward, almost using your feelings to determine where you are and what's happening, but also sitting in a chair, doing it visually, imagining yourself floating forward into the future, but as you're imagining yourself floating forward, imagining all those things that you can usefully do to improve your performance and the way you move forward. The other thing I found with timeline is that future pacing, which is imagining yourself doing particular actions in the right way, in the right states in the future, is tremendously powerful. And it almost surprised me, as I've mentioned before in various episodes, is that by mentally rehearsing, you're almost locking it in to your brain so that you will do those actions at the right time. And future pacing is a really great way of taking the learning from the classroom or the learning from a studying place so it actually occurs in real action in the outside world. And therefore it's a very important way of turning planning into real action and real results. A case study. One of my clients is a really good saleswoman, and she'd been in her job for 3 years. She'd always been producing really good results, but her problem was she didn't have a future vision of what she wanted to do. She could see as far as the next quarter's figures, but she had no thoughts of what might happen after that. And she had noticed that some of the people that previously had performed very well had sort of fallen off. They had come into problems, they didn't produce results, they got fired. And while there was no sign at all that would happen to her, she realized there was a certain risk in what she was doing. So she actually wanted to get herself into a job where she was confident about the future, which she wasn't obviously at the moment. So that was the situation. What was the objective? Well, the objective was to get her to explore how she could plan a future career that would give her money, would give her job satisfaction, and give her this view of the future which would empower her. What did we do? We took her through the outcomes exercise that we've done previously, and we took her through the timeline exercise that we're about to do. what were the results? Well, initially the results came as a bit of a shock to her, because in working out what she needed to do to get what she wanted, she realized that she had to face some of her own fears. She had to show some real deep courage inside. She also had to work quite hard to develop the skills that she would need to put herself on the right trajectory to get to where she wanted to go. So the initial action after we did the exercises was she wanted a week to think about it, because it actually unlocked the fact she had to make some big, important personal decisions to move forward. What happened after the week was that she decided to go ahead, and we filled in some of the details of the plan and the particular actions that she'd need to take to move forward. And I'm very pleased to say that 2 years later, she's changed company. She's now still in sales, still producing really good results, but she has an agreement with the company that she has her own personal progression plan, which coincides with the company's development plan, and if all goes well, she will get to that position she wants in 2 to 3 years. So she's now got a job she really enjoys, she's being well paid, but she's actually got a future mapped out, which she has shared and has agreed with the people running the business. So she feels really, really good. So what do we need to do a timeline exercise? Well, the first thing I'd like to say is there are lots of varieties of timeline exercise, and they all have their merits. So we're going to focus on one here that is very easy to do, just requires you to sit in a chair and think through the future as I take you through the process. There is one thing I'm going to ask you to do first that is actually very important to do the exercise, and that is think about where you are now, think about your end goal, and write down 3 milestones that are between where you are now and your end goal. In addition to timeline, we're going to do some future pacing, which is you rehearsing some important steps that you need to do to start your journey. So in addition to your key milestones, I'd like you to write down 3 key actions, and I want you to make them easy key actions. I don't want to start with anything too complicated. We can always do the difficult stuff later, and if you want to do the difficult stuff, you'll always do it. What's important to me is that you start taking action. So I want you to write down 3 easy actions that you could take, that if you did take them, or when you took them, they would genuinely move you towards that first milestone. Let's start the exercise. I'd like you to sit in a chair, make yourself really comfortable, take a few minutes, a few seconds to really stretch, be comfortable. Now, I want you to imagine that your future is like a very wide beam of light going forward. And it's going forward a long, 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 long way. Almost over to the horizon, maybe even further than the horizon, because I want you to have this image of you having a long, very successful, very enjoyable future. Now, as you're thinking of this beam of light, which is your future, I want you to imagine that you're already putting resources of tenacity, of enjoyment, of creativity, of all those states that will help you have a really exciting, enjoyable, fun, giving future. Now, having done that, I'd like you to imagine yourself sitting here now in the present, and I want you to imagine yourself going forward to your first goal and find yourself being drawn to well achieving that first goal. And when in your mind you've well achieved that first goal, I just want you to spend a few seconds imagining what you might be seeing, imagining what you might be hearing. Just imagine what it might feel like to have really successfully achieved that first goal. Now, when you've done that, I want you to imagine yourself coming back to the present But you may choose the opportunity as you come back to the present, either consciously or unconsciously, learning useful lessons about that journey. So when you make that journey in real life later, you will have already learned some of the things that will make it more fun and more enjoyable to you. And you will have learnt how to get over any of the inevitable obstacles that will occur. When you get back to the present, just relax for a few seconds. And then, when you're ready, I want you to imagine going forward again, this time going forward through the first milestone, having achieved that maybe even better this time because you're always learning, to having achieved the second milestone. And when you've really achieved the second milestone, again, just spend some time being aware of what you see, what you hear, how you feel. Maybe and throw in some tastes and smells of what it's like when you've really achieved that second milestone. And again, find yourself being drawn back to the present. And as you're drawn back to the present, you may, either consciously or unconsciously, learn how you manage to get over some of those obstacles that will be there. So actually those obstacles become positive challenges for you to grow rather than problems for you to solve. And when you're ready, be drawn back, so you're again sitting in the chair, feeling comfortable, feeling ready to go on the next part of your journey. And again, I want you to go forward, successfully completing the first milestone, maybe even better than both the first and the second times, being drawn forward to the second milestone, and then being drawn forward to the third milestone, so you have some representation of what it will be like having really well achieved the third milestone. See what you see, hear what you hear, feel what you felt, or feel what you will feel. And again, having seen what it's like having achieved the first milestone, the third milestone, I want you to find yourself being drawn back and again, either consciously or unconsciously, learn the ways that you can improve whatever you need to do to easily get over any obstacles that may occur. And take the time you need until you find yourself back in the present. Again, relax, feel comfortable for a few seconds, and then find yourself going out on this journey, again completing that first milestone, seeing what it's like to complete the first milestone, being drawn to the second milestone, feel what it's really like to achieve that second milestone, on to the third milestone, being aware of the things that you've needed to do to achieve that third milestone, through the third milestone, far into that successful future when you have achieved your end goal. And again, when you've achieved your end goal really well, just be aware of what you would see, what you will see, what you hear, how you feel. And think again of the end goal, and just be aware of how proud you will feel having achieved it. Enjoy that for a few seconds, and then begin the journey back. And remember, the journey back is about learning. It's about learning the good bits and the bad bits. It's about learning how you can deal with both. That's right, and come back learning how the next time you do the journey, it will become even easier, more fun, more enjoyable. And you will have developed all those qualities that will help you get there earlier. And as you come back in the present, just rest a few moments and almost in whatever way works for you, tell your unconscious mind to consciously or even unconsciously start planning what states, what resources, what skills, what people will be able to help you reach your end goal with more certainty and more fun. And when you've done any thinking that's useful to you, just come back to the room and open your eyes. Now, again, I want you to relax in the chair because I'd like you now to imagine how you're going to do those first few steps. And I say it's important that you have first few steps that are easy to do, that are fun to do, that you have absolutely no excuse for not doing. And these are the first few steps that will help you get to your first milestone. Now take the first step, and before you imagine yourself doing it, I'd like you to think of an appropriate time in the future, an appropriate place in the future when it would be appropriate, when it would be highly appropriate to do that first step. And I'd like you to think of a highly appropriate state to do the first step. It might be confidence, it might be with humor, it might be with determination, it might be with giving. Whatever will be the right state for you to achieve that first step in the right way. And what I'd like you to do again is just imagine yourself at that time, in that place, easily and comfortably carrying out that first step in the right state to do it in exactly the right way. And maybe as you're doing it, you can choose to improve or fine-tune what you're doing. But imagine it's actually you as you doing that step enjoyably. When you've done that to your satisfaction, come back, and I'd like you to do the same exercise with the same step, but in a slightly different way. This time, I'd like you to imagine that you're actually watching yourself doing that step at that time in the future. Because as you're watching yourself, as you're detached from you doing it, you can actually learn how to do it better. So I want you to imagine that you are watching yourself doing that first step. And curious enough, when you've done it, I want you in your own mind, in any way that makes sense to you, and you may prefer to do it unconsciously, or you may prefer to do it consciously, I want you to coach yourself how you could do it better. And then I want you to imagine yourself watching yourself taking that first step again. But this time, because you've coached yourself, you will find that you're doing it more efficiently and with more fun. So just watch yourself taking that first step again. And when you've done it, come back to the present. Sit for a few seconds, and I'd like you to repeat the thing with your second key action, your second first step. Choose an appropriate time and a place to do it in your mind. Choose an appropriate state to do it. And easily and comfortably imagine you doing it as yourself in that state. That's right. And when you've done it, come back to the present. And this time, imagine yourself watching yourself doing the same action. So by watching yourself, you can coach yourself how to do it maybe a little bit better. Maybe, curiously enough, you can coach yourself how to doing it a lot better. And when you've made sense of that in any way that works for you, come back to the present again. And this time I want you to imagine yourself doing the third of your key actions. Having chosen the right state, the right place to do it that will be perfectly safe and really, really useful to you, imagine yourself doing that step. Then imagine yourself watching yourself doing the step, so you can take any learnings and you, in an either conscious or unconscious way, can improve your performance. And then drift back to the present. And as you're just sitting in the present, I just want you to be aware of two things. That you have done some very important mental processing that will help you on this journey. You've traveled and rehearsed your end goal. You've traveled and rehearsed the milestones and the end goal and what it's like to have achieved them. So you will have come up with a very powerful view of what your long-term plan, what your long-term purpose, your long-term vision is. And at the same time, at the other end of the polarity in a way, you will have imagined yourself easily and comfortably doing those first key steps. Because it is taking that action of those first key steps that will enable you to do it in the real world at the appropriate time. That's right. just come back to the room. Maybe spend a few seconds processing those things that are useful to you. And just listen to me for the last few seconds of this episode, because I'd like to summarize what we've done and remind you what comes next. A summary on what's next. In this episode, we've done some very important things as far as the planning process. We've actually explored our very end goal. We've explored what it would be like to go through the milestones and achieve that very end goal. So we've strengthened our vision, we've strengthened our purpose, which is a sort of magnet to get us to travel the distance to actually achieve what we want to achieve. But equally important, at the other end of the spectrum, we've rehearsed those very small key steps that when we take them, will have started building the momentum we need to speed up for that journey. So, to end this exercise and this episode, I'd like to thank you for the effort that you've put in to do what you've already done, and say that in the next episode, what we're going to do is continue pulling everything together. So you begin to realize how all the steps that we've taken in all the episodes work together to strengthen the end result. And then at the end of that, there is a bonus exercise, which again will take you on a more detailed version of a timeline, which will enable you to do a lot more than we've done in this episode, and a lot quicker. However, we've needed to do this episode in a building block to get to where we're going. Thank you very much for your attention.